A homeless man was discriminated against in a diner and was helped by Jasmine Crockett. What she did led to the bullies getting what they deserved. James didn't look like someone who frequented this place. He walked a bit slowly, his left foot tending to drag slightly with each step. His back was slightly hunched, not necessarily due to age, but as if life had pulled one shoulder lower than the other. On his back was a faded backpack, its torn fabric straps tied with old shoelaces, dangling a rusty keychain. His left hand held the backpack strap. His right held a crumpled, wet, then dried $5 bill, creating folds like a map of a forgotten land. James's eyes were slightly sunken, with dark circles as if someone had cried for a very long time but never enough. His skin was dark, tanned, peeling in small patches around his cheekbones. His lips were dry, slightly cracked. His chin was covered in stubble. Not long, not short, just enough for anyone to realize he hadn't stood in front of a mirror in a long time. But it was his gaze that made others turn away. A cold gaze without reproach, without expectation, and without fear. A kind of gaze that can only be acquired when one has become accustomed to being ignored. He wore a faded gray t-shirt, its collar frayed, its back stained with sweat forming a dark patch from his nape down to the middle of his spine. His jeans were old, one cuff wet with mud. His sneakers were unstitched, their soles warped, the tongue torn, revealing dark, mismatched socks. The smell he carried was unclear. The smell of wind, the smell of sweat, or the smell of being forgotten, but it clung lightly, subtly, like a breath that couldn't be named. His name was James. At least that was the name he once used. Before people called him by nameless sounds, "Hey you, move aside a bit," or worse, nothing at all. James stood at the edge of the counter, not too close to intrude, not too far to be out of sync. He was silent, his eyes on the menu board above. Bean rice, $4.50. No drink included, no substitutions. The fine print at the bottom clearly stated, "Takeout customers, please do not use the seating area." He had seen that line, and he still walked in. Behind him, the door chimed open, then closed. In front of him, a gleaming service counter, staff standing straight, nylon gloves hugging each finger. The person, a young man, glanced at James, then turned away, his index finger tapping lightly on the screen. James understood that look, a look devoid of any goodwill, but James was very hungry, and he still stood there, not backing down. Because if there was one thing James had learned after 3 years of belonging nowhere, it was this. Silence is also a way to avoid being pushed away. "Can I help you?" A male voice rang out, soft but not pleasant. The young man behind the counter didn't look directly at James when he asked, but glanced over as if asking about an item placed on the wrong shelf. James leaned slightly. The bill was still in his hand, neither offered nor withdrawn. His lips moved a little before he spoke. I just want to buy a portion of bean rice." This time the employee looked up completely, looking directly at him, his eyes unable to hide his scrutiny. "Small change?" "Yes." $5, James said. His voice wasn't trembling, but dry as if he had just gone through a waterless afternoon. He didn't smile, nor did he refuse. He just exhaled very slowly, then turned to his colleague in the kitchen, one hand covering his nose. "Is anyone checking the air conditioner?" "There's a strange smell," James heard, very clearly. His hearing was still very sharp. The only thing was, he had learned not to react. He turned back, adjusted his gloves properly, then asked, "For here?" If there's a seat, I'll sit, just for a few minutes." The employee nodded. Not a nod of agreement, but as if acknowledging it and leaving it at that. His hand glided over the touchscreen. James quickly stepped aside, making way for the person behind him. He held the paper bag with both hands, not tightly, as if there was something precious inside. When he found an empty table near the window, before he could even put the tray down, a voice rang out behind him. "Oh, hey, I'm sitting there." James turned around. A white man, gray shirt, loose tie, holding a cup of coffee and an unprinted receipt. He hadn't sat down yet, but the voice carried absolute ownership. James nodded, walked away, not arguing. No one in the restaurant looked after him, but he felt all eyes on him. Another chair near the potted plant. He tiptoed and sat down. His left hand held the bag. His right hand opened the lid of the tray. The smell of rice wafted up normally. "Do you hear anything?" A woman's voice at the next table. She tilted her head towards her husband, covering her nose slightly. "Something smells terribly foul." This time James stood up, without waiting for anyone to tell him, without needing anyone to point. He just gathered his bag, moved to a table hidden behind a pillar. He just wanted to eat a decent meal. That corner was colder, less light, but quiet. He thought so. As he was about to put the tray down, two young men at a nearby table looked at each other. Then one of them, blonde, wearing a leather bracelet, stretched his leg out very slightly. James didn't anticipate it, tripped, he didn't fall. But the rice tray spilled. Grains fell clatteringly onto the floor, clinging to the side of his shoes as if the meal also refused to be close. His back straightened. His eyes, cold as ice, looked at the rice tray, then at the young man. "What are you doing?" His voice deepened. The other man shrugged. "You carelessly tripped over my leg. Now what kind of attitude are you showing?" That defiant look and challenging question made James truly difficult to control, but he still tried not to burst out. "You clearly did it on purpose." The two young men stood up, striking a thuggish pose, and began to raise their voices. "You stinky old man, what do you want? This isn't a place for street sleepers like you. If you know what's good for you, get lost." The atmosphere began to tense. The poor homeless man just wanted to eat a quiet dinner. He looked at the two young men, his eyes still cold, but his hands clenched. Surely he was trying to suppress his anger to avoid any action. The employee saw this and walked over, but instead of asking if he was okay, he looked at James and sighed. "Sir, if you can't maintain order, I'm forced to ask you to leave." That sentence, slow enough, clear enough, for the entire restaurant to know who was considered the troublemaker. James opened his mouth to say something, but he realized no one wanted to hear him speak. They all wanted to quickly get him out. James bent down, picking up each grain of rice. He thought he would eat the rest of what was left in the tray, or the parts that hadn't touched the ground. A woman's voice rang out from the back of the restaurant, deep, sharp, and it made the entire eatery fall silent. "He's not the one you need to remind." The voice came from a corner of the restaurant, deep, firm, like a brake pulled on a curve. No need to shout, but enough to make those who were laughing turn their heads. A woman stood up, from a single table inside near the window. No one had noticed her until now. Black blazer, neatly tied hair, no lipstick, no jewelry, but her eyes were not dim. James looked up, a little surprised. He didn't think anyone would stand up for him. The two young men stopped their actions. One of them sneered, still shaking a can of soda. Oh, another one defending their friend. The other man curled his lip. She probably also slept on the street, so she understands. The atmosphere in the restaurant began to stir. A few glances darted over, then away. Some turned their backs, pretending to continue eating. The employee also stood still for a moment, then walked out, smiling faintly. "I think you should let us handle it. No need to make a big deal out of it." The woman walked towards them, each step light even, not rushed, not trembling. "I'm not making a big deal," she said. "I'm just standing where many choose to remain silent." The blond man tilted his head up. "Who do you think you are?" A moment of silence. "I am Jasmine Crockett, United States Congresswoman." No one responded immediately. Then laughter burst out like a broken air bubble. "Ha ha, if you're a congresswoman, then I must be the president." The other man laughed heartily, slapping the table. "Do you think everyone will believe you just by saying a few moralistic words? Look at yourself." A customer at the next table also burst out laughing. The laughter lasted a few seconds, then shortened when they saw her still standing still. Not flustered, no reaction. "Do you think a high-ranking congresswoman would appear in a common restaurant like this and stand up for justice?" "You seem to watch too many movies," the blond man continued, voice still half mocking, half provocative. "Are members of parliament not allowed to eat common food?" No one believed it. Everyone around also showed contempt. The guy pulled the glass of iced water he was holding, tilting it towards her. "I also have a statement. Water splashed out, soaking one side of her shirt. She stepped back exactly half a step. No more. Her expression unchanged. "Oh, sorry," he said, narrowing his eyes. "Oh, it was an accident." A few giggles trickled from nearby tables, but no one was genuinely laughing anymore. The atmosphere began to shift. She reached into her bag, taking out her phone. A decisive movement, as if she had done it many times. Her eyes never left the person who had just splashed water. "Call the police. Come immediately. Urgent." Her voice was not loud. Not a single superfluous word. The entire restaurant seemed to freeze for a beat. The blond guy burst out laughing, patting his friend's shoulder. "She's calling the police. Let's just live stream it. Maybe it'll go viral on TikTok." James remained seated, but his eyes had changed, no longer dull, but the look of someone seeing the impossible become possible. And Crockett, she stood there, back straight, eyes bright, still holding her phone, as if she had just placed a stone in the exact center of the chessboard. Less than 7 minutes later, the shop door swung open. A police officer walked in. White skin, tall build, slightly bulging belly, left hand on his belt as if ready to pull out a ticket book, right hand quickly sweeping across his waist as if assessing the situation. He scanned the room, stopping at James, then at Crockett. "What's going on here?" he asked. His voice was even, not harsh, but it was clear he had already assumed who the problem was. The blond guy spoke first. "That homeless person came into the restaurant with a terrible smell. He wasn't looking and tripped over my leg. His rice spilled on the floor. Then he started arguing with us. This lady is not involved, but she interfered, saying we were nothing." The young employee nodded in agreement, pointing at James. "That's right. He had an attitude from the beginning. And that lady said she was a member of parliament or something, making everything a big deal." The police officer turned to Jasmine, looking her up and down. His gaze was quick, not crude, but full of categorization. "Can you show me your ID?" Crockett was not in a hurry. She looked at him like someone who was too familiar with that question. Then she was about to reach into her bag for her wallet, but ironically, she didn't have her wallet with her. "I don't have my ID with me because I thought I was just going out for a quick meal and then coming back." The police officer heard this, and his face clearly showed annoyance. He must have thought she was a braggart. "Or perhaps you are a fabricator, impersonating a senior member of parliament, which is also a crime." The police officer threatened. The air froze. A nearby table of customers recoiled. Someone put down their glass slower than usual. James stood up. His hands trembled slightly. He took a step forward, standing next to Crockett, not speaking to the police officer, but looking at her. "Stop. Don't say any more. We can't change anything. They will protect each other. They will suppress you with power we don't have." His voice was choked, not from fear, but from sadness. The kind of sadness of someone who has seen this happen hundreds of times, and each time the outcome is the same. Crockett turned. Her gaze softened, not out of agreement, but out of understanding. Very clearly, if people like us don't know how to protect ourselves, protect each other, then such things will certainly continue, or worse. The police officer began to look smug, casting a judgmental gaze at the two people of color trying to uphold justice. "This is not a big deal. You two shouldn't cause trouble in public like this. Apologize to those two guys and the people in the restaurant, and I'll consider the matter closed." A blatant and arrogant conclusion was uttered. The two white guys looked at each other, smiling smugly. Crockett was surprised that the police officer could say such a thing. She calmly protested. "You are slandering us. We are the victims. Why are you making us apologize to those who discriminate against us like this?" The police officer replied with the utmost shamelessness. "Everyone is a witness to your prior disturbance. If you don't apologize, then come with me to the station." Jasmine couldn't believe that a police officer, the symbol of justice, had become a bully of the weak. She quietly raised her phone again, dialed the number. This time it wasn't a request, but an order. "Transfer the call to Chief Officer Henderson. Tell him Jasmine Crockett needs urgent assistance at this address." The police officer laughed, thinking she was just trying to play her part, that no one would come. A chief officer, he had never even met him, let alone him appearing after just one phone call from a person of color. Less than 5 minutes later, the sound of sirens echoed outside. No one in the restaurant stood up, but everyone looked toward the door. A second police officer walked in. Officer Henderson, his uniform jacket unbuttoned, his name tag gleaming on his chest. He walked straight, without asking for directions, without glancing at anyone. His eyes immediately found the person he needed. "Madam, I apologize for being late. Congresswoman Crockett." The initial police officer froze. His eyes darted quickly from Crockett to Henderson, then back again. His mouth hung open, stuck as if his throat was locked by exactly 2 words. "Congresswoman, really?" The smiles on the faces of the 2 young men vanished. One stepped back half a pace. The other bowed his head, still clutching his phone. Everyone in the diner was startled. Silence enveloped the place. A few whispers about the truth. Now every movement seemed very loud. James couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him was a real high-ranking member of Congress. Crockett, with a serious face, recounted the entire incident to Officer Henderson. Officer Henderson didn't need to ask much. He nodded slightly, then turned to his subordinate, who was with him. "Extract camera footage. Take statements from everyone. Call my office to verify each action." The initial police officer intended to argue, but Henderson's gaze pierced his face as if to strip away the reason before it could be uttered. "Jacob, you're coming with me to the station. You've made a very big mistake, but first you need to know what you should say now." The police officer's face was drained of color, his head bowed low, his hands clasped tightly together. Sweat soaked his collar, his voice trembling. "I apologize, Madam Congresswoman. I was blind. I made a big mistake. I will accept the punishment. Please forgive me. Please forgive me." Jasmine felt more relieved than ever, but she still couldn't calm down. "I think someone else also needs an apology from you." The police officer quickly turned to the homeless man, apologizing profusely. Seeing this, the 2 young men pleaded. "We really didn't know you were a congresswoman. We didn't mean to. We apologize. Please forgive us." The diner employee was also scared, bowing his head and apologizing 3 times. But Crockett was a strong advocate for justice, and apologies would not carry as much weight as appropriate punishments for those who treated people like dirt. She signaled to the chief officer. "I understand, madam," Henderson nodded and said. He signaled. Handcuffs were brought out. A click echoed. From the 2 young men to the employee, they successively left the diner. Their arrogant, smug expressions from before had completely disappeared. The police officer quietly followed the chief officer, awaiting a well-deserved report. The entire diner held its breath. No one dared to laugh mockingly anymore. A few people stood up and left in a hurry, as if they feared they might be the ones handcuffed next. Crockett didn't look at them anymore. She walked closer to James. His shirt was still wet, but her shoulders weren't slumped. "Are you okay?" James looked at her with an expression of utmost gratitude. He took her hands in his, saying, "Thank you, Miss Crockett. You bravely protected me. You are truly a good person." Jasmine smiled warmly, gently holding the homeless man's hands as if to answer that it was inevitable, that it was what she should do. She turned to her assistant. "Find a good restaurant nearby for me." The diner remained as silent as before, but this time it was the silence of realization, of confusion, remorse, and awakening. The 2 left the small diner together. James sat down at the table. He didn't speak. His eyes touched each dish as if this was the first time he had seen kindness served. Not out of pity, but out of honor. Crockett adjusted his collar. Then he said softly, but loud enough for him to hear, "Today you are not a beggar. Today you are a guest." The second restaurant was not far away. A small but cozy restaurant with wooden walls, warm yellow light, and the gentle clinking of spoons against plates, like the sound of wind chimes. Unlike the previous place, no one looked at James when he walked in. No one looked at Jasmine either. People were busy eating, busy living, and in that busyness, there was an implicit equality that James felt more clearly than ever before. A table for 2 had been reserved. White tablecloth, tall glass water goblets, white porcelain plates with silver rims. A basket of crispy bread had just been brought out. James sat down slowly. His body still seemed unable to believe that he was allowed to sit there. In front of him was a menu, untouched. Beside him was the woman who had just pulled him from the abyss. No introduction needed, no words spoken. Jasmine ordered for both of them. Her voice was soft, decisive. Honey-glazed grilled chicken, beetroot salad, pumpkin soup, a portion of coconut ice cream for dessert. James looked at the plate of food brought out without speaking. His hand rested on the table, retracted, then reached out again, his fingers dry, trembling slightly. He hadn't eaten. He was observing. Jasmine didn't rush him. She sat there pouring water, nodding gently as if to say, "Please make yourself at home. This is all for you." Finally, James picked up the spoon, a small spoonful of soup, put it in his mouth. Hot. Software. A gentle sweetness flowed down his throat, and, unexpectedly, his eyes welled up. Not just because it was delicious, but because after many years he was able to sit and eat so properly. James's eyes lit up, looking up at Jasmine. "This is the first time," he said, his voice choked. "I've had a table full of such delicious food, and it's also the first time a member of Parliament has sat across from me." Jasmine put down her spoon. She looked at him, directly but gently. "I am also just a human being, born with a healthy body. We are all the same, but we treat each other differently based on the color of our skin that we did not choose. I just want to bring recognition, and I want to protect the vulnerable, hoping they will have a less dark life." James bowed his head. He didn't know how to respond. Her words were like a soft blanket, covering his cold heart, and he didn't know how to express his gratitude. "I used to be a cook," he continued, "in a small shop, not big but clean. I know how to cook grilled chicken. I used to have a spice notebook. But then everything disappeared since the day my wife and child died after a long trip. The little girl got lost in the forest. Her mother went to look for her, but the others didn't care about the existence of the mother and child, and—" He didn't finish. His eyes looked out the window, where cars passed by as if they had never known he existed in this life. "Do you want to cook again?" The question was light, but it fell like a pebble into a pond that had been still for too long. James didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, looked at the chicken plate, half empty, looked at his hands, which were no longer trembling. "Do I really still have a chance?" Jasmine nodded, gently but firmly. "We all deserve a second chance at life." James clenched his hands as if clutching the precious opportunity that woman had given him. Outside, the sky was still bright, but for James, something had changed color. 2 years later, a small restaurant located on the corner of the street, old brick walls covered with ivy, a hand-carved wooden sign, James's Table. No loud advertising, no luxurious decor, but the sweet aroma of food spread far, in waves every time the door opened. And there were always people waiting. Inside was a warm space, wooden brown-covered shelves of spices, soft yellow hanging lights, the rhythmic sound of knives chopping vegetables, the gentle sizzle of oil in the pan when minced garlic was thrown in. And in the middle of the open kitchen was him, James, wearing a cloth hat, an apron, and a white shirt with a few streaks of flour. His face was dotted with sweat, but his smile was intact. His eyes were no longer cloudy like they were years ago, but bright and focused, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. On the wall, there was a small photo, Jasmine Crockett and James, both standing in front of the shop, hands clasped, radiant smiles. Below the photo was a hand-carved inscription. It started with a meal. Next to the ordering counter, there was a small blackboard written in white chalk, free meal portions daily for the homeless. No one was asked for their name. Just walk in, sit down, and wait for a hot tray of food to be brought out. James always personally prepared those meals. No matter how busy, he would stop what he was doing when he saw someone in a worn coat holding a plastic bag, eyes cast down. He would place a hand on their shoulder, asking nothing, just saying, "Sit down, wait a moment." James no longer wrote recipes in his notebook. Now he remembered every flavor in the palm of his hand. But in the drawer under the counter, He still kept the piece of paper with the address Jasmine gave him that day, faded but with the handwriting still visible. It was one of the only things he never threw away. And every evening, when closing the door, James would look around one last time, clean up, wipe the last tray, and stand before the small photo frame, just for a few seconds as if to remind himself. Everything started not from luck, but from someone believing they were worthy.